You have two types of people in the DeFi industry. Number one, those that don't even know about divergence loss. They don't even know what it is. They don't even know it exists. And truth be told, they can't be scared of something that they don't know about. And then type number two are those that are deadly afraid of it and will avoid liquidity pools at all cost, will avoid DeFi at all cost because of that divergence loss. They think it's better to just hold. But don't you think that in a $194 billion industry that there would be some way to potentially outpace divergence loss and some way to be profitable? Truth be told, a lot of people are just delaying things and they're excusing things, and it's because they don't want to put in the time, the effort, take more risk, and that's completely valid. But those of you that do will have immense returns over the next 3 to 4 months. Let's talk about it. I'm going to start by pulling up Ethereum to USDC, and we're just going to go on Metrics Finance and simulate this. Whenever Ethereum goes up in price, right, our Ethereum gets sold to USDC in this example. Why? Because people are buying it. That's why it's going up in price. People are buying our Ethereum and we are receiving USDC. So we give them Ethereum. They give us USDC. Simple exchange, money's trading hands. It's super easy to comprehend. Over here you have the trader, right? And then over here you have the liquidity provider. They are essentially giving us USDC and they are taking our Ethereum. Simple as that. Now, the thing is, when they give us USDC, we're going to get a little bit of a fee in USDC. Maybe it's 0.25%, maybe it's 0.05%, maybe it's 0.01% or something like that, right? Point is, they're going to give us a fee. And when there's enough trading activity happening, this fee outweighs any difference, right? Because yes, we are selling our Ethereum prematurely in this example. Now, I don't always like to look at the example of Ethereum to USDC when it comes down to divergence loss. The reason why is because there are so many ways to avoid it, and the number one way is just don't be in a crypto to stable liquidity pool. Because on the other end of things, when the roles are reversed, people are giving us Ethereum and they are taking our USDC. So we are going to have more USDC. They're selling their Ethereum, which is why Ethereum is going down. So on the way down, we accumulate more Ethereum. You can see those examples right over here. We start with, let's just say 0.1162 Ethereum, and when the price of Ethereum goes up 5%, we now have 0.0873. Or when the price of Ethereum goes down to, like, let's just say 7.6% or so, we now have 0.1613 more Ethereum that time. So if while the market is going up, we are essentially selling Ethereum slowly, obviously, but surely, and while the market is going down, we are essentially buying Ethereum. What does that allow us to do with these liquidity pools? It allows us to dollar cost average out of our positions. In the bull market, right, or at least towards the end of it, we want to start selling our Ethereum. So rather than essentially just hitting the sell button, right, or slowly dollar cost averaging and, it taking personal accountability, stick it in an Ethereum to USDC liquidity pool with maybe a plus 30% range and a minus 10% range, right? So you primarily put Ethereum in this liquidity pool. And if we were to take a look at that with, say, 10 grand or so, right? If we do minus 10 and plus 30 over here, we are sticking about 70% of our capital in Ethereum. And then as the market moves up, as Ethereum goes to, in this instance, say $4,500, we are starting to sell that Ethereum into USDC. We now have 75% USDC. It's laddering out our capital. And yes, there's divergence loss, but again, if we are laddering out on our own, dollar cost averaging out on our own, there would also be divergence loss. So again, this is the number one way to use it to your advantage. This is the simplest way. Institutions that I've worked with in the past that have $10 million in these strategies, they do this, right? Same exact thing comes in the bear market where they want to accumulate Ethereum, or when there's a dip, they want to accumulate Ethereum. They just flip it, right? Minus 30% plus 10%. And what does that do? Well, let's take a look, right? We do plus 10% right over here, and we do minus 30% on our min price. Even with $10,000, we're putting up 78% in USDC. Well, when Ethereum starts to go to a price of, let's just say $2,800, look at that. We now have 2.63 Ethereum, which we can then go and hold until we hit a desired price or flip into a new strategy. Point is, we dollar cost averaged into Ethereum. We lowered our initial cost basis over time. As I mentioned, these are the same exact strategies that institutions are using to exit. The reason why is because now they are earning fees instead of paying them. In this example, they're earning a 28% annualized return in fees as opposed to having to pay 3% on the overall position value. Fairly simple. And you get that on both the upside and the downside. Which intrinsically, when you are selling ETH, what does that do? That essentially increases your proceeds that you get for selling ETH, therefore giving you a higher capital gain. Whereas when you are buying ETH, that lowers your cost basis over time because you're earning fees. Now, me personally, I think we're kind of at this stage in the market. We have a solid 3 to 4 months left to go, maybe a 30 to 50% return on investment for Bitcoin or so, right? So I am starting to ladder out of Ethereum coming into the next 1 to 2 months or so. I'm setting up these cryptid stable positions with smaller amounts of capital at first, but then putting more and more and more money behind them. And not just with Ethereum to USDC, but SOL to USDC, Bitcoin to USDC, stuff like that. So if you guys are looking to take advantage of these next 3 to 4 months and you have above 50 grand in your portfolio, there's a lot of mistakes that you can make diving into this. As I mentioned, divergence loss, it's a blessing and a curse. So if you want us to essentially give you a gun, place your hands on the gun, line up the sight for you, and all you have to do is click the trigger when it comes to your DeFi portfolio, check out the link at the top of the description. We have a white glove service called DeFi Legacy, cost about 10 grand. We have payment plans available, but you will essentially save more money by doing this as opposed to going out and making mistakes on your own. Not to mention, you'll be able to actually capture the 3 to 4 months that we have left in this market as opposed to trying it out on your own, things not working out immediately, maybe losing some money, and then also missing out on the upside on the money that you lost. Just a constant downward spiral from what we've seen based on clients that we've actually worked with in the past, and they tried it on their own before they came to us again. But diving a little bit deeper, right? This goes further than Ethereum to USDC. This goes into Ethereum wrap Bitcoin. This goes into Ethereum paired with an altcoin, right? There are so many different opportunities we can do here. But let's start with Ethereum to wrap Bitcoin. We're no longer looking at the dollar price chart, right? We're looking at how many Ethereums equal one wrap Bitcoin at one given point in time. So let's do some math over here. If one Bitcoin right now, say, equals around $120,000, right? And then one Ethereum right now, for easy purposes, say equals $4,000. How many Ethereum does it take to equal one Bitcoin? It takes 30 ETH to equal one Bitcoin. Simple as that. Now, what happens when Ethereum goes up 10% and Bitcoin goes up 5%? That puts Bitcoin at $126,000. And then when Ethereum goes up 10%, that puts it at $4,400. Well, now let's do the math. 126,000 divided by $4,400. That gives us 28.63. So it now takes 28.63 Ethereum to equal one wrap Bitcoin. Well, on the chart, it looks like this thing's bleeding. It's going down. But reality is that's just Ethereum outperforming Bitcoin. And when we relate it back to Ethereum to USDC, when the price goes down, what's happening realistically here? USDC is outperforming Ethereum. So with that being said, we can essentially run the same exact process with Ethereum wrap Bitcoin and assets like that, right? Because Bitcoin always moves first and it moves the most, and that money flows into Ethereum, and then it flows into large caps, and then it flows into altcoins. So with that being said, let's just say we start with 10 grand here. We want to primarily allocate to BTC in this instance. We start with the majority of it, right? And then as Bitcoin starts to outperform Ethereum, right? So maybe Bitcoin goes up to 150 grand, up 27%, and Ethereum goes up to maybe $4,500. So it's only up 18%. In this instance, you'll start to see that wrap Bitcoin is being shifted into Ethereum. We started with about 80%, and now all of a sudden we have 66%. And then maybe Bitcoin goes up a little bit more. It goes to $165,000. Now we have 46% wrap Bitcoin. It's dollar cost averaging or laddering out of Bitcoin and laddering into Ethereum, in which when we're happy, we close the position, we hold that Ethereum, or we stick it into a new strategy, this time with Ethereum and large caps. And then what do we do next? We do Ethereum to altcoins, or if we can, large caps to altcoins. And that essentially allows us to consistently flow from Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and then alts, but maximize our gains within each and every single individual category. Maximize our Bitcoin gains, maximize our Ethereum gains, maximize our Sol gains, and maximize our alt gains. And then that right there is where we do alts with USDC, or we could go back to the beginning where we do BTC with USDC and then ultimately ladder out that way. Or we could just click the sell button on a decentralized exchange. But point is, we get out into stable coins, and then ultimately we take those stable coins and we earn about 30% APR in them throughout the bear market. Use that as cash flow, put the money in our bank account, take some fruit of our labor. But this right here is how you maximize your gains in each and every single individual category, as opposed to just randomly flipping through all these different cryptocurrencies, chasing what is trending on Twitter, going in on CoinGecko to the trending section and diving into these ones, right? That's not a good strategy. Actually having a plan and a system is a good strategy. So once again, if you guys have over $50,000 in your portfolio, I'm going to leave a link for you guys right at the top of the description for you guys to check out. If not, enjoy the free content on YouTube. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe, notifications turned on, and peace out.